As scientists, we live on the very edge, between what is known and what is yet to be known, standing on the shoulders of giants to peer over the horizon, healing doubts as well as diseases. In the last 50 years alone, we've seen miracle babies who now have babies of their own, who may grow up never hearing the words smallpox, polio, measles, and live decades longer than their grandparents. Why? Because science. We witnessed a whole new body of medical advances that came from inside the human body itself. Because science. Heartbreaking quilts stopped being made. Artificial hearts started beating. SARS was contained and controlled. Whatever challenges humanity faces in the years ahead, the last 50 years shows us that we can prevail. And even diseases like COVID-19 will one day yield. Why? Because science.
The Prix Galien is a welcome initiative to stimulate creative research and promote excellence. Barack Obama. The Galien Awards ceremony is considered the equivalent of the Oscars night for the innovators in the labs and awards every year the best pharmaceutical product, the best biotechnology product, the best medical technology, and the best digital health product.
This is the right event, on the right issue, at the right time.
I thank His Excellency, the President, for bringing Prix Galien to Africa, and I look forward to the day when we will celebrate an African winner of the Prix Galien.
I'm particularly grateful to receive this award.
The awards are among the highest honors in science and commerce because they lead to improvement in the human condition.
The Prix Galien Awards recognize the world's brightest minds and most innovative companies. They are a true celebration of the hard work required to produce life-changing interventions.
That is what makes us optimistic about the future.
Congratulations to all of you.
Make a difference. Join the Galien Foundation. The Galien Week of Innovation has been made possible thanks to our precious friends and partners who share the Galien Foundation's values. First off, the two exclusive platinum partners are We would now like to acknowledge our two gold partners. Furthermore, we proudly introduce our corporate leaders partners. The associate partners are the grantors are To conclude, we are extremely fortunate to work with outstanding media partners who have contributed to the Galien Foundation's renown.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very auspicious day. My name is Alexandra Von Plato, and I'm the CEO of Publicis Health. Publicis Health is a global communications network dedicated to healthcare communications, patient-physician communications, and scientific storytelling. And we are so proud to be working with the Galien Foundation for many, many years, including instigating the US Prix Galien. So I just want to tell you a little story going back to our roots. Obviously, Publicis is a company that's headquartered in France, and our chairman and CEO was very close with Bruno and the team who began Galien from its inception. And I was introduced to Bruno Cohen, the chairman of Galien Foundation, several years ago, and I was invited to attend Prix Galien. And I was awestruck by something that I intuitively knew but hadn't witnessed in the way that Galien presents it. And that was the personal human commitment, the humanity and heroism of the scientists and researchers who do the hard work for years and years, looking for needles in haystacks to bring forward the cures, the therapies, the vaccines, the solutions, and the digital technologies now and platforms that are actively producing, improving human health and wellness around the world. And my early experience in this storytelling category of health and science and healthcare began right out of college, where I joined a film production company. And my first project was something called the Framingham Heart Study. We were sent to document Framingham and the understanding of the link between cholesterol and heart disease, and tell the story of those researchers' experiences. We lovingly called the film Mevacor the Movie. And since then, I've been absolutely devoted to the power of scientific storytelling to drive engagement. Because at Publicis Health, we believe that breakthrough medicine, breakthrough therapy, and breakthrough science deserves, and in fact requires, breakthrough engagement to be able to serve the need and the opportunity for these medical and scientific and technological breakthroughs to help as many people possible in the world. So we've developed an expertise that we call across the engagement value chain, from creating engagement with patients and researchers in R&D, all through the commercial process, right through to the LOE period for these brands, to make sure that all of our clients are able to maximize the power of engagement at any point of the product life cycle, and to really understand the new opportunities to connect with patients and doctors in the platform world that we all live in now. So with that, I am just so honored to be in the company of this prestigious and elite group of people who are changing the world and are making a difference, and who are the recipients of the prestigious Prix Galien in 2021, which has been an auspicious year for this industry, whose efforts did nothing short of save the world and are in the process of saving the world from a global pandemic. But here among us are the winners of the awards for Best Medical Technology Product. And you'll meet briefly in a minute Frank Lavalier from Alcon, Best Digital Health Product. And we'll welcome Patricia Bradley from Huma Therapeutics, who's virtualizing the hospital room, and a very exciting platform she'll tell us about. Dr. David Platt from Novartis will talk about Entresto, and it's very close to me because my father suffers from heart failure, and I'm familiar with the exciting story there. And Dr. Kim Smith-Whitley from Global Blood Therapeutics, who will talk about what caused them to win Best Biotech Product of 2021. We'll also meet, and I'm extraordinarily honored to follow up this conversation with the winners with a conversation with Dr. Awa Marie Kolsek, who is from the Republic of Senegal. and is taking the continent of Africa, starting with Senegal, into the future as a power to be reckoned with for the development of new approaches to protecting and providing for human health. So I'll look forward to that. But first, I'd like to start and let the panel, who won last night in a glorious event, and I'm sure many of you are quite tired, but I'm sure enthusiastic about your win and energized. I'd like to introduce the panel, starting with you, Franck Lavalier from Alcon.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Yes, I am Franck Lavalier. I am the Senior Vice President and Global Head of R&D at Alcon. And I must say it is really an honor for us to have been nominated and then to have won this prestigious prize. So thank you very much on behalf of Alcon.
Franck, can you tell us a little bit about your innovation and just give us a top line of the product that won and the solution that won?
Yeah, so the product that won is an intraocular lens, which is called Panoptix Trifocal Intraocular Lens. As a background, an intraocular lens is a tiny artificial lens for the eye. It replaces the eye's natural lens that is removed during cataract surgery and when the cataract has become cloudy, making it difficult for patients to see. So there exist already some intraocular lens solutions. They were existing at the time when we developed Panoptix, but these solutions had some limitations. And in particular, the patients who underwent cataract surgery typically still needed glasses for reading their iPhone, for example, or intermediate vision, for example, when viewing a computer. So to address these limitations, with the list of IOL options and the increasing aging population, Alcon really decided to develop a lens that offers a full range of vision at far, intermediate, and near. And so Panoptix is really the first and only trifocal lens in the United States. It's a revolutionary innovation that allows millions of adults to remain active and fulfilled as they embrace the aging process.
Thank you, Franck, and congratulations to you and your team at Alcon. I'd like to introduce Patricia Bradley, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Huma, and they are also leading the way for a change in the format of delivery of care that is proving to have great promise. Patricia, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the solution that resulted in you winning Best Digital Health Product in 2021? Maybe we lost Patricia. I think we may have, so we'll wait to get her back, and I'll move on to Dr. David Platt from Novartis, who will help us understand a little bit about the Entresto story and the best pharmaceutical product of 2021. Hi, David.
Hi, thanks, Alexandra. So I'm David Platt. I have the privilege to lead our cardiovascular, renal, and metabolism medical unit at Novartis US. And, I'd like to start by just saying how honored Novartis is to accept this prestigious recognition. And thank you to all of the researchers and investigators, patients and their families and clinicians who've really made this journey possible with Entresto. And a very big congratulations to my fellow award recipients here, as well as all of the breakthrough therapies that were recognized in our category by the Galien Foundation. So, I think about heart failure really as an area that has been in significant unmet need for many years. It is the leading cause of hospitalization for adults who are over 65. It just creates huge cost to the healthcare system. It's 1 to 2% of annual healthcare costs in the US, and the incidence is actually increasing. So, this statistic it just always, strikes me that by 2030, 1 in 33 of all people in the US will have heart failure. And that carries a 5-year mortality rate of 50%, which is as high as many cancer diagnoses. And so Entresto was developed with the goal of improving these patients' lives by reducing their risk of heart failure, hospitalizations, and death. And things really started in 2006 when researchers at Novartis set out to do something very sort of imaginative, which was to combine a novel neprilysin inhibitor, sacubitril, with an angiotensin receptor blocker, valsartan, to develop Entresto, which is now the first-in-class angiotensin receptor neprilysin inhibitor, or ARNI for short. And what really got Entresto over the finish line, which was, I think, your question, was the landmark phase 3 paradigm trial, which led to Entresto's first approval for adults with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. And that was the largest heart failure outcome study to date. And it was stopped early for overwhelming efficacy for Entresto compared with an active comparator, enalapril. And what's important about that is enalapril had been an established standard of care treatment for heart failure, reduced ejection fraction already. So this wasn't a placebo-controlled trial. It was really comparing to the standard of care at the time. And the trial showed a 21% reduction in heart failure hospitalization, a 20% reduction in cardiovascular death, a 16% reduction in all-cause death. And it also reduced 30-day readmissions to the hospital following a heart failure hospitalization, which is very important for hospitals in how they're able to get reimbursed for the care that they provide. And so these were findings of superiority compared with one of the best therapies we had at the time. And so Entresto was subsequently granted a priority review and an accelerated approval by the FDA. It was added to heart failure guidelines with a class 1 recommendation for patients with heart failure, reduced ejection fraction, so that when it was approved in 2015, it really represented the first breakthrough treatment in heart failure that we had seen in over a decade. And then since its introduction, we've had further real-world evidence that's shown that patients who were treated with Entresto are less likely to be hospitalized, less likely to incur total healthcare costs versus patients who are treated with ACE inhibitors. So that's real-world confirmation of what we saw in the clinical trials, which is always a validation and gratification that you did the right trials on the right patients, and you can see that impact in the real world. And then in 2019, Entresto was granted an additional pediatric indication for heart failure patients as young as 1 year old, based on the Panorama trial. And in that area, there had been very limited heart failure treatments for pediatric patients, where they carry a very substantial burden of disease, and so that was an important breakthrough for us as well. And then finally this year, as a result of data that was uncovered in the Paragon heart failure trial, we saw benefits in a subset of patients who were diagnosed with heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. And so Entresto, based on that, became the first and only therapy approved in the US to treat both heart failure with reduced ejection fraction and patients who have heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, who have an ejection fraction below normal. And, to what really excites me about all of that, when I think about, the last 24 hours, it is sort of all the prospects that carries for innovation in this area, because when you put all of these trials and the data together, what they really do is they improve our overall understanding of heart failure as a disease. So in addition to giving us a treatment that meaningfully improves outcomes for people with heart failure, I think this program has also taught us a lot about how different groups of heart failure patients respond to therapy. And it gives us a lot of areas for additional research on how we can get better at phenotyping patients with heart failure. And I think that will fuel the next generation of heart failure therapies to get us closer to what we all want, which is as close to a cure for this as possible. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this.
Thank you. And clearly, for something that was approved in 2015, the march of developing the proof and the evidence of the impact of Entresto going forward across so many patient applications has been impressive. I'm sure what influenced the jury. I'm going to go to Dr. Kim Smith-Watley from Global Blood Therapeutics, who, congratulations, Dr. Whitley, on Best Biotech Product 2021. And let's hear a little bit about Oxbryta.
Thank you so much. We are thrilled at GBT to be the recipients of the Prix Galien. We're over the moon for the sickle cell community that has been so long overlooked and under-resourced in this area. Oxbryta is a once daily oral medication for children and adults, children over 12 years of age. And it's indicated for all types of sickle cell disease. Just as a background, sickle cell impacts about 100,000 here in the US, but millions worldwide, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And even though we know the genetic variation that leads to sickle cell disease and sickle hemoglobin, and then that polymerization or the stacking of the hemoglobin, particularly under deoxygenated conditions, that leads to hemolysis. It leads to, unfortunately, a lot of acute complications such as stroke and unpredictable pain. It also leads to end organ damage that then results in early mortality, 30 years short of the African American counterparts here in the US. So despite the fact that we know about sickle cell to the genetic level, despite the fact that we have described the first patient living with sickle cell disease in 1910, we have now 4 drugs for sickle cell. GBT was just particularly committed to understanding more about sickle cell disease, given all of the healthcare inequities and social inequities that this community of color had experienced for so long, and thought of an innovative way of temporarily getting hemoglobin to hold on to oxygen a little bit longer to prevent sickle hemoglobin polymerization. And through that, really allow us to address the root cause of sickle cell disease, the sickling. And through that, we have been able to show an increase in hemoglobin, a general sense of well-being in the 270 odd people that were we were privileged to have participate in our clinical trial. I think that the thing that is a wonderful aspect of Global Blood Therapeutics is that we're committed to the sickle cell space. So we're continuing to develop our pipeline to address the unmet needs in the sickle cell community. We're trying to figure out if we can make Oxbryta better and really find a way of having a bigger impact on this population of patients. We want to see whether or not we can address pain and reduce pain with some of our agents. So I think that the other special part about GBT is not only its commitment to drug discovery and development, but it's also committed to communities that have experienced healthcare and social inequities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And congratulations again to you and your team. And I want to, now that Patricia Bradley's back from HUMA, you know, I think one of the most exciting developments that the pandemic catalyzed was the advent of digital monitoring, telemedicine, and the platforms that could be put to use to improve the quality of care and extend access to more people. So I'm very excited to hear about your win and congratulate you all at HUMA, Patricia.
Oh gosh, it's funny, right? We're going, I work for remote patient monitoring and we work remotely. And the first thing that happens even on this call is my internet drops. So between the landscapers being here, cutting the grass and the noise outside, and then the internet dropping, it shows that we have come such a far way in how we think about things. Previously, we would have all been mortified if this was going on a call, but we've gotten to be so much more real in the last couple of years. And I truly appreciate that evolution of people in general and tolerance for what life is really like, because it's full of potholes and you just want to figure out your way to maneuver around them. So, you know, at HUMA, I'm part of the global team that is trying to leverage technology to scale up and actually make a significant difference in healthcare for all. Because I do believe that the phone, or through technology like this, that you have access to so many people. So for us at HUMA, we're phone agnostic. So we don't care what kind of phone somebody has. We're not particular to a brand of phone. But what that does is it allows us to operate at a global level. So we're phone agnostic, cloud agnostic, disease agnostic, and really it's about the technology. What I think is the important part is the technology of something like the phone allows us to bridge to so many people. And there it's really about bridging research and care. We started out HUMA as a company that worked in rare diseases, remote patient monitoring for home care or hospital at home, whatever you want to call it, depending upon what part of the world you're in. And then with COVID, you know, it became critical. You couldn't have all these patients in the hospital. I mean, I wasn't kidding about people being in hallways. I watched my dad in a hallway for a couple of days in some of these cases, and that changes your perspective dramatically. So what can we do? And then you're discharging patients and nobody is watching them, and you're expecting this poor person to keep an eye on themselves. And so that's where I think technology was really showcased, and it's evolved a lot since then, even with other parts of COVID. But you could ship out oxygen meters and keep an eye on them almost as you would in the ICU. It's a constant monitoring. And then through technology, we're able to send that back to the portals for the clinicians to look at and triage it using things like digital biomarkers and risk scores that tell you the patients that are most likely to not have a good outcome and that you need to watch differently. So you wind up with that kind of stoplight, you know, what I'd say red, amber, green alerts on patients, so you know who to look at. Because that's where technology comes in to play, is getting through all that mess and the congestion of information that's out there to find those that you really need to take a look at, because it's not to take the place of a clinician. It's to help them and assist them and make it easier for them to find where their knowledge and expertise would be best applied. So what had also happened with COVID is we wound up getting into clinical trials too, because the same thing that we're doing for hospital at home, you can collect so much more information when you add in technology, whether that be the blood pressure cuffs, sleep patterns, steps taken, and then find out if a therapy is really working, so that you can see more of the 360 view, like what are you really doing to this person? And are we having a benefit? And can we identify the perfect population where this really is an ideal therapy, or where you get maximum benefit? And then you have that real world evidence on top of it. And so, you know, for us, we did a lot of work with the NHS in the UK, but then also worked with the Health Ministry of Germany, deploying to hundreds of clinics in a day. But you can only do that with technology. You basically just deploy, and then you find partners, right? I think that's what the last couple of days is about too, is we're going to have to collaborate, because no one person will have a solution that will meet everybody's needs. And through all of this, you know, I think at the end of the day, we can get to a point where we really customize a patient experience to what they're going through and help them in this journey. And using technology and proactive predictive scores and digital biomarkers and other things, we can better tailor what we're doing overall for all of us on this call, because we all come in from a different point of view. So that's where I think what you're doing with Galien and the foundation is really critical, because you bring us all to a place where we talk. And as I have said before, I think there's a new level of cooperation and collaboration that we're all embarking on, and that I really see this as potentially having significant impact. And I know, like for us, we've deployed our hospital wards or hospital at home programs for HUMA in India. We're in discussions to do that in Africa and other places, because if you can get a cell phone there, that's the first step, and it helps to bring technology to everybody. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. I think it's clear to see that these are all pioneering innovators in these companies and these teams, and the pioneering doesn't stop with the development of the solution, the approval, and certainly not with this level of recognition. I hope this recognition actually puts wind behind your sail even more so. I want to be clear that the jury for the Prix Galien is a prestigious jury of industry leaders, including many Nobel laureates, and that the bar set to be acknowledged with a Prix Galien award is very, very high. I believe there's something like 85 submissions across many, many therapeutic categories. Very many meetings take place for a week, reviewing all the submissions, you know, a very elaborate process that every submission goes through. And that's, of course, on top of what you all went through to get here. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit, is some of the, let's talk to the broader community about what your endeavor was like, how you moved your research forward, where you saw the hurdles that you were able to overcome to get to the point where you are now with the prospects ahead of you. If you could talk, maybe starting with you, Kim, about the hurdles, about what was in the way and how you knocked them down, and maybe for inspiration for the people in the future Galien Prize winners.
Well, I think that one of the things that we're all here about is the science and the technology, right? That really is the underpinning, but also the opportunity to help individuals on the other end. And I think that one of the things that we had with the science part of it is just trying to find the right way to find the right molecule that was going to hold on to oxygen for that just right amount of time in order to get the maximum benefit with the lowest side effect profile. And I want to say that one of the things that was inspiring to me is that I've been in the sickle cell community for a long time waiting for medications to treat patients with sickle cell disease. And the GBT group discovered this molecule in 2012, and by 2019, it was in patients' hands. And I think it was by addressing the potential barriers early on. We understood that we were going to have to look at a new endpoint, that many had focused on preventing acute pain. And acute pain is an issue in those living with sickle cell disease. And it's one that we need to overcome. But the majority of individuals with sickle cell disease are dying from end organ damage. And so trying to get to the root cause of sickle cell disease through sickling was really one of the barriers in trying to address this with the community and saying we have even a bigger issue that we need to deal with as well as with pain. We need to deal with both. And I think that the other opportunity was to find partnerships for really accelerated approval and making sure that when you in the rare disease space or in a patient community space that really needs options, that you work with your partners to make sure that you can do studies in a way that are meaningful, but that are urgent. And we saw that in the COVID pandemic, right? And I think that, when I look at what we've learned from that pandemic, it inspires me to even think about developing drugs in a faster way to get around these challenges. How much of the technology that Patricia is doing can be used in homes? How much of this can we get to communities ex-US that need our help and that should be participating in trials? So yes, we had barriers, but I think that we learned from them and we're going to challenge ourselves to even be better the next time.
I think what you said about, leveraging a sense of urgency. And it's interesting that, there wasn't such a sense of urgency for forever around sickle cell disease. And the ability to create a shared or a broader sense of urgency with a broader set of stakeholders who would engage. And COVID did that because it was a global pandemic. The urgency was actually part of the engine that drove the engagement in the solution and the partnership and the collaboration that came from the urgency. Frank, aging, cataracts, people might not, broader society might not have a sense of urgency around the loss of sight or the diminishment of visual acuity. But for the people who are suffering from it, they have it. And I think we often lose sight of the population's experience with urgency versus society's experience with urgency, and how we come together to solve on behalf of patients and society. So I'll let you tell us a little bit about how you got what you ran into as hurdles and how you addressed them.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandra. And really, the gift of sight is something extremely important. And people are living longer. And, you know, when you lose sight, it is really terrible. You lose your independence. So it is very important. We feel that our mission at Alcon is really important to help people see brilliantly. So during the development of Panoptix, there were a few key areas that were critical to getting this product over the finish line that ultimately help lead to its commercial success. So first of all, you know, when we were at the stage of proof of concept to first of human testing, the biggest unknown for us was whether the good quality optical images that we were obtaining at far, intermediate, and near distance on the bench from the first prototypes lens that we had made would yield, once implanted in a human eye, some good visual quality images with limited visual disturbances. Disturbances such as halos and glare, for example. Another key challenge to get to first in human was to translate a design that had been generated in silico with the support of a computer into a prototype lens, which involved a lot of iterative work, in particular when it comes to cutting pins, making molds for any single optical power we had to make for the clinical trials, and to create a manufacturing infrastructure for initiating these clinical studies. Later on, during development, there were a few areas of focus where we had some hurdles to overcome. For example, metrology. You know, we had to create an end process development measurement capability applied to every commercial lens produced, such that we can ensure the optical performance for every single lens in terms of lens power and optical quality. Also, you know, we had to perform, of course, some clinical pivotal studies where we had to ensure that the proven results we had found in first in human would be again repeated when we commercialized Panoptix. So we had to confirm the first in human results at a larger scale as part of our PMA application to get approval in the US when the surgical and the manufacturability variabilities were introduced. We also had to develop and validate a patient subjective response questionnaire, which is called a PROM, patient reported outcome measure, in order to check and to allow patients to report in particular on two key aspects. Number one, their quality of vision under normal and dim light conditions, to check whether they were having some visual disturbances or not, which were important in terms of safety. And also to check whether they really were achieving spectacle independence. So these areas, coupled with having the ophthalmic commercial expertise of Alcon, the global leader in eye care, has helped drive the commercial success of this lens. The clinical results are really exceptional. You know, with Panoptix, 20/20 near, intermediate, and distance vision is possible. We performed a large meta-analysis of US and worldwide clinical data, and it has reinforced the fact that this lens provides patients continuous 20/25 or better vision from distance to near at 33 centimeters, which is an incredible feature for an intraocular lens. Our analysis from this study also showed that at least 9 out of 10 patients implanted with our lens can be expected to achieve complete spectacle independence, which is overwhelming proof of how this technology delivers on its promise. Our clinical results show 99.2% of the patients say they would have the same Panoptix lens implanted again. And 98% of people with the lens also reported that they would recommend this lens to their family and friends, which is a clear measure of satisfaction after the lens is implanted from the patients. The surgeons who also perform the surgery and recommend this lens to their patients have also expressed very high satisfaction with the visual outcomes they are seeing in their patients. The feel is this lens is a game changer for them. They feel that the IOL fits very well into their clinic and their practice, and they feel it fills the gap that has been missing all these years, namely continuous range of high quality vision from far all the way to near. I would just like to finish by emphasizing the social economic gains that this lens is bringing. People are living longer nowadays, and there are 56 million Americans that are 65 plus today, and there will be 80 million by 2040. So the majority intend to work well past retirement age out of desire or out of necessity. With such ambitions, you know, the prevalence of sight-robbing cataracts, the most common age-related condition, demands technological innovations that let people remain productive and contributing members to the society. So Panoptix makes it possible to read text up close, to read a computer screen easily, and to see better at night. All these are critical for aging. So this is really where Panoptix is bringing a real clinical value for the patients.
And also the sense of well-being that comes from not having your sight degrade incrementally or exponentially over time, which adds to people's sense of not being able, not being capable, not being participating in life.
Indeed, indeed, Alexandra, it's a key component of the quality of life of people.
Yes. The world we see, the world we can see. David, you, in terms of the hurdles you've overcome, Novartis keeps putting new hurdles up to discover the application of Entresto and to be able to extend it. I mean, how are you finding, you know, the recent hurdles in pediatrics? And, you know, how would you describe, you know, how you've approached some of these new opportunities to create therapeutic advancement?
Yeah, Alex, I think, you know, the theme of just the last couple of you know, parts of the discussion around urgency and perseverance to overcome challenges, I think we've seen the same thing with Entresto. You know, we've known since the 1980s that inhibition of neprilysin enzyme could potentially augment natriuretic peptides, which would be a good thing in heart failure, to increase natriuresis and vasodilation. And neprilysin inhibitors were actually applied in the 1990s to heart failure, and they didn't work because they actually led to upregulation of angiotensin II, which counteracted the beneficial effects of natriuretic peptides and led to angioedema. And it was really, you know, the kind of brilliant insight to combine a new neprilysin inhibitor with an angiotensin receptor blocker that would just mitigate that increased upregulation of angiotensin. So, you know, that just ingenuity and the previous experience that you need to be able to come up with, you know, a new idea like that, I think that was probably the biggest hurdle to overcome, to figure out how to actually apply a modification of this enzyme neprilysin to actually help millions of people with heart failure. But then, you know, the urgency, I think, was so critical because the experts and the investigators and the research that we're working with, you know, they felt that they knew enough about neprilysin inhibition at that point that they forewent a phase 2 program. So they went right into phase 3 with adults with heart failure and reduced ejection fraction, knowing that it would take so much time to do a big outcome study, 8,400 plus patients in that kind of a trial. And so taking that risk and that leap actually accelerated the ability of this treatment to patients. And so I just can't recognize that kind of thinking and patient-centric approach enough. And I think it's something that, you know, we've seen this past year, right? When the urgency of dealing with a massive global health crisis that just mobilized the healthcare world to do, you know, amazing things. And so, I think we see the same with the indications that have come. You know, I think we've seen with heart failure preserved ejection fraction patients, we're able to understand them better based on the Paragon trial and who would benefit the most. And we're able to update our indication based on that data. And that has moved the science forward. So I think it's really a common theme across everybody who's spoken here, which is amazing.
It absolutely is. And, you know, you were up against the standard of care, which is part of your solution, and helping clinicians beyond your researchers really embrace a first-in-class combination therapy that is making, you know, tremendous impact on people's lives and outcomes, and really changing the game in heart failure as a condition that you can live with and have a high quality of life as a result of the work that you've done. So again, having a father with heart failure, I thank you very much. You know, Patricia, I'm sure you were up against obstacles all the time. I mean, you're in a whole new, brave new world, and they're probably too numerous to illuminate, but obviously urgency helped around the pandemic to get your solution deployed and tested in the real world. How are you continuing to do the R&D, you know, in the environment that you find yourself in?
So, you know, it's interesting. There's so much comes out of this. We started with, like I said earlier, with the hospital at home, and from that quickly got pushed into creating a solution from that would be a decentralized clinical trial offering, right? Could we are monitoring them now. We wanted to get them into the vaccine trials quickly as possible. So we wound up in some of these cases, you know, technology is great sometimes because you can create code and you can make things happen pretty fast. We created this platform. It's a modular platform, and you can turn, basically it's like switches. Which ones do you want on? It's the same platform that's used for hospital at home is used for the trials. You're just turning on different components. And we had to quickly come up with the entire e-consent process to get people onboarded. And I actually remotely clarify and do identity therapy, you know, make sure we knew who they were and could identify them through their government IDs or whatever we had. It was whirlwind. And then at the same time, you have to find these partners, because we would have to deploy kind of like the ICU at home and get blood pressure cuffs and get oxygen meters to people overnight. And that's where you pull in your logistics and distribution partners to ship millions of these all over the place. And then, you know, you're testing out new technologies that do heart rate and heart rate variability right from your finger on the phone. And so all of this comes in. What then happened for us is we had the data that could create a risk score to triage them, right? And we actually do quite a bit of work in digital biomarkers and other areas, but we had all this data from all the hospital at home, and you've got to use it, right? Why? It's such a waste if you don't use it in a way that will benefit people down the line. And I think that's what we're all talking about here. It's speed, right? Speed in the COVID pandemic is critical. We all know that. I mean, we couldn't do it any faster. If we could have gone faster than a week, we would have gone faster. I mean, you're moving at the speed of light. To move stuff to people that quickly required a lot of logistics, collaboration. And so what you wind up in the end, and what we're still building on, is continuing to partner and create that ecosystem that brings in others. So, you know, can you find companies that can ship 1 million devices in a day, ship phones, ship different monitors? Yep. Can you tap in, use Bluetooth to anything, you know, what I call, like, it's like bring your own device. What do you got at home? Can I Bluetooth it in? Can I pull that data? Can we start to clinically validate that? That's the other side. You think that all these devices are out there. They're not all the same. Some are clinically validated, some are not. So what we continue to do now is try to clinically validate that. That's why sometimes it's just directional, but directional may be all you have, and you have to make a decision off of that. We built in telehealth too. It's like, how can you talk to them? We can't bring people in. We didn't want to expose them to other people and increase the, you know, how many people wind up with COVID. We didn't want to increase the incidence. So we wound up with this remote monitoring, but also telehealth involved in that. And then you got to connect to everybody's system, their electronic medical records. I mean, there could have been more obstacles. And they continue to pop up day to day because technology keeps changing. I wish I had a crystal ball. I swear sometimes you just sit there going like, can we just give me like a break to know what's going to come so I can prepare for it? But that's not the way this works. And so you've got to be agile. I think that's what we've all learned, is that agility of leadership within our organizations to be able to pivot on a dime and help the greater community. Because at the end of the day, we know how important that is. And speed to market, we're still in this. We're not done. We've got this second wave going on. You know, what's the next thing that we have to tackle? And I think we just have to be open and don't get our feet stuck in the mud that we're not willing to pivot, so that we can help, you know, do the greater good for society in this process. So I think that's what we learned. There's a lot of flexibility, but it will require a lot of coordination. And I think we're just at the beginning, but the bumps just keep obstacles keep popping up. And then luckily, you got a lot of smart people around here that can help solve those problems.
You know, while we're speaking about HUMA, Patricia, and you've already touched on it, but I'd like to move the question into the category of the future, because we talked a lot about what you've done and what you had to overcome to get to this point. But I want to talk a little bit about what your fear is. You know, what are your obstacles going forward, and what are your greatest opportunities going forward? And, you know, how as a global community can the whole Galien community support the success of each of your, you know, breakthrough endeavors here. So I'll start where we left off, Patricia, because you were talking about the hits keep coming as one of the obstacles, you know, being prepared to be agile and stick and move and prepared to pivot. But what keeps you up at night now, other than that serious?
There's a lot of stuff that keeps me up at night. Besides my 18-year-old son in college, who keeps me up at night as I worry about him. But in the other side of the world, you know, if you look at this, I think about our system and how sometimes we're fearful of some of these things, like the regulatory side. How do we accept the real world evidence, these different data points? How do we build them in to be clinically validated? They're going to be different ways of collecting information and monitoring how patients are doing. So, you know, you look at like the 6-minute walk test and other things. Why can't we get these things there? So how does the FDA and other regulatory bodies look at this? And will they be more open to stepping into it a little differently, so that we can reduce the cost, you know, overall for clinical trials and other things? Like you know, we're doing a lot of work in things where you use the phone for movement disorders like Parkinson's disease. Devices can remove rater bias, right? But now you have it. Will it be accepted as an evaluation of the patient, right? And then looking at progress of the patient, can you use it clinically to make a decision? And at the end of the day, it will be a clinician making that decision. But we can regulate the heck out of these things and slow them down coming to market when we know there's a huge benefit, and specifically on the cost side, right? And we don't need to overburden a system that's already just doesn't have enough resources to do, you know, what we'd like to do. So that keeps me up at night, that we're going to get in our own way. And I would love to see different, whether it be the FDA and their innovation center and others, step in and look at this and not make it so hard that we don't get the economies of scale in this area to see the cost benefit, and that companies don't shy away from it, right? And that we can get into it, because you have label expansions, you have specific subgroup populations that you want to look at. Do you really need to go through a full trial, you know, in that way? Or can we look at real world evidence and different cohorts within that? And so some of that, I think we create our own obstacles, and I wish we could reduce some of our own obstacles that we create.
I think we probably all would agree to that. You know, and I would just ask each of you maybe to quickly share if there's one thing that you think is an obstacle in the future that you would want to point, you know, this audience to. Kim, what would you say it was?
Well, I think that in the setting of wanting better medicines, I think that we have to free ourselves from old standards and exploring new ways to approach healthcare. One of the ways is our clinical paradigm. In the sickle cell community, we have been reactive. We have been so used to trying to keep patients alive once problems occur that we haven't moved from a reactive mode to a proactive mode of prevention. You know, that despite the fact that we've known about sickle cell for a long time, we have no universal cure. And that's primarily limited by the need to do pretty big chemotherapeutic medications for conditioning for hematopoietic stem cell transplants, whether or not they're experimental, or if you're lucky enough to have a brother or sister that's a perfect match and that doesn't have sickle cell disease. So when you think about these great limitations, the other problem is that the chemotherapy is so strong, you have to have healthy organs. So it's no surprise that these things work best on the very young. So we need to change the approach. We need to focus on prevention, starting therapies early enough so that individuals never have to experience the stroke, never have to experience the kidney damage. Maybe we can make them have healthier lives so that they'll be healthy enough for cures when we find those cures. And I think it's also thinking, that approach, that change in our philosophy that we have to challenge ourselves with, not only as scientists, but as physicians, because we can bring the best of medicines forward. But if you're not willing to change your approach to how you're using them, then the patients don't get the full benefit.
Kim, thank you very much. I think you speak for all of us, and I want to thank you and congratulate you again. Thank you for participating in this discussion. It was very vibrant. I learned a lot, and congratulations on your stunning achievement, winning a Prix Galien to all of you. So with that, I congratulate the winners, and I'd like to turn the conversation to Dr. Awa Marie Kolsek, who serves as the Minister of State and of the Republic of Senegal, and is the chair of the Prix Galien African Committee. Welcome, Dr. Kolsek.
Thank you for inviting me.
It is a great honor to have you with us and to revisit the conversation that you started having last year in the 2020 Prix Galien around the impact and the promise of what Prix Galien means in Africa and to Africa, and what the advances in understanding human health and well-being on the African continent means to the world. So maybe you can help us understand your feelings of why now, why Africa?
I would like, first of all, to thank the winners, and also to tell you that it will be very important for me just to highlight the issue of health being at the beginning of development, but also to be able to really act for the world. And Africa is ready to do that. Africa is ready to do that because we need to know that the world is a global village. No one could be free if everyone is not. And if people are developing a lot of things in the north, without Africa, it will be particularly for all this pandemic, it will be difficult to people in the world to be healthy. It is why Africa has its role to play, but for that, we need also to put on our agenda to ensure that equity exists, equity between the North and the South, but also equity in a country. Because you can have in a country people who are not able to afford things. And this is very important as a point. The other one is collaboration and also working in solidarity. And I wanted, if I had time, to speak a little more on vaccine, because I have in front of me a lot of pharmaceutical industry. And what we have seen during the COVID-19 is that we had a lot of vaccine in the north, and the population, we can see 70% of coverage. And in Africa, you have only 2%. And if we don't have access to vaccine, the world will not be safe. This is a point I wanted to put on the table, and it is why we have decided to do more by having this Galien Forum also in Africa. We have a lot of activities, a lot of meetings, a lot of research in Africa, but this one is to ensure that the world is connected with Africa, but also African as connected between them. And the forum, for 4 years now, we have been organizing a forum in Dakar. This is the fourth forum. In December 7 to 11, we will have a forum in Dakar where we will call a lot of scientists, experts, Nobel Prize, etc., but also, more important, the young people and women. We will have special sessions for young people where we will train them in leadership, but also give them opportunities to share and to meet with investors concerning inventions, but also women scientists, women from the community, to discuss the theme. This year, the theme will be global health security. And with that, we will have thematic discussion too. And I think that this will be the key element of our forum. We had last year 3,000 people online. Because of COVID, we are doing that online. But this year, we will continue online for the technical part, but we will also have in presential the prize. The first time we will give the Africa Galien Prize. And this will be given by the President of Senegal, His Excellency Macky Sall. But we will be able to also give a sort of celebration for the 50th anniversary, normally, of the Galien Prize. And we will have a celebration there, and we will be showing officially the shortlisted people from this prize also. So this is very short, but I wanted just to tell you that people cannot really continue to really have things developing in the north and not in the south, and particularly in Africa. And I hope that the winners, I heard them very well, and I know that they were putting on the table the issue of price, etc. It is because they are sensitive by the fact that they cannot have drugs or process developed in the north for the north and not for Africa. And I thank them also for having this type of thinking and this type of sensibility.
Well, the concept is urgent one of global health equity. So we had a conversation about the role of urgency in driving solutions and change. And the pandemic, I think, served up, a measure of urgency, and the role of Africa in the ability to address COVID in Africa and therefore secure global health is a profound, it seems like a simple statement, but profound and has been profoundly difficult. I mean, I also just want to pick up on one thing you said about young people. One of the great resources Africa has for the world is its youth. And the way Prix Galien and yourself are engaging the youth, the young people's imaginations, creativity, and energy to be part of the solution. And that's a huge that's a huge initiative and objective of the Galien Foundation in relationship to Africa and unleashing the power of Africa on the world. And
thank you. I wanted just to add that what young people we are inviting, it is the best student from universities all around Africa. Last year we had 25 countries, and it is important to take them as leaders, not only technically, but also have leaders tools with them. And innovators, there are also a lot in Africa as young people, and this is also very important to put them in contact with investors for them to be able to have more money to do their research, but also to be able to scale up, because have one prototype is not enough. This need to go to scale, and it is why this part is very important. And we have been part of another type of prize, and I think that we will do our best to ensure that everywhere young people are there, innovation is there.
Well, clearly diversity and inclusion has become an even greater priority for the North, and the opportunity to partner with African nations and have the opportunity to bring more diversity into healthcare and the solutions that we develop is a huge, largely still untapped. So I think it represents, there's even more urgency now to make sure that Africa is fully participating in the future of innovation in healthcare and in medicine. And we're at the Galien Foundation, there couldn't be more of an emphasis there.
You are all invited to the forum, the Africa Forum in Dakar on 7 to 11 December. It can be also virtually, so you have no choice, you have to be there.
That's a little bit more than an invitation. I think it's a direction. You know, Dr. Kolsek, you are also an infectious disease expert. So we just lost your camera. Are you still with us?
Yes, I was thinking that it's time to conclude, which is why I didn't.
I would like to ask you one question. I think we have a little more time. What do you think is the silver lining of what we learned in the pandemic from your perspective as an infectious disease specialist?
First of all, I think that we need to ensure that we are not looking at pandemic as a medical issue. It's good to have drugs, it's good to have vaccine, but we need also, what we have learned is that we need leadership, we need a multi-sectorial approach, we need also community-based engagement, we need a good communication for people to understand. You know, a lot of fake news has been on the ground, but also to ensure that locally we are able to do things. And vaccine locally produced in Africa, we are pushing for that. And I think that all these are basis of success if we want to really overcome this pandemic, and solidarity is very important.
Thank you very much. I can't think of a better note to start to conclude this discussion. The pandemic is not only a medical emergency, it was an emergency of engagement. It was an emergency of alignment. And one of the silver linings was the collaboration that it produced that hopefully is now the template for going forward. And, you know, clearly illuminated the issues regarding diversity and inclusion and access to healthcare and the disparities there. And there's no going back. This has all been drug out into the light of day, and we have overcome to the extent that vaccines and therapeutic solutions were so rapidly developed, but the deployment and the access remains a priority. And we have opportunities to drive innovation in the areas of access, in the areas of engagement and understanding, because understanding and science education, Ken Frazier talked about yesterday, the role of literacy in being able to communicate with broader publics about the reasons why they should even care and how they understand is a whole other area of solving for pandemics in the future. So thank you very much, Dr. Kolsek, and thank you to this panel for all you've done to get yourselves here and to advance human health and wellness. I want to wrap up just by saying special thanks to my friend and all of our friend, Bruno Cohen, who's the chairman of the Galien Foundation and who works tirelessly all year long. You know, we see Bruno in a beautiful velvet tuxedo once a year if we're lucky at the Galien Foundation and the Prix Galien, and you see him around the world. But the seminars and all of the discussions that happen globally that the foundation also supports are advancing this global ownership of health and wellness, and also creating the basis for collaboration that every single one of you have highlighted as the real engine of innovation now. No one individual on this call or any of the many, many hundreds who submitted for Prix Galien this year is going to solve the problem they're focused on alone. No one company is going to go the distance alone. It requires a real village. And I think we've proven through the pandemic that that's actually at hand. And, you know, quite exciting, the opportunity to drive innovation through partnership that I think we always spoke about in our industry, but we saw it happen so clearly over the last several years in approaching the solutions for this pandemic. And there's no stopping us now. I just want to make a couple last announcements. Please save the date for Thursday, October 27th, 2022, when the Galien Forum and Prix Galien will return to New York City. And what a wonderful event we had this week and last night in particular. And I look forward to seeing you all there next year. I also want to remind you that today's webcast and all the recordings will be available from the forum, from the show last night, the Prix Galien, and today will be available. They've been recorded and there'll be a YouTube page up and everybody will get a note about how to access all of the proceedings that took place over this incredibly exciting and powerful week. I'm sure you are all going to need some sleep. But I think you also probably, like myself and so many of us who got to witness what happened last night and this week, the enthusiasm and the level of just motivation could not be higher. So it's never been a better time to do what you all do. And I'm just honored to be in your company and to have been a part of you sharing your stories today. Thank you so much and congratulations again.